Hey everyone! Happy end of summer semester. I just want to say that I really enjoyed working with all of you, and I'm sad to see the session come to an end, but I'm really excited to get back into the classroom in August with everyone. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you all are too. Today I'm going to be guiding you through a lesson that I worked on that will take us through a Socratic seminar based on The Great Gatsby. So it's intended for an 11th to 12th grade English class. I would probably use it in the 12th grade setting just because I feel like more mature students would have a little bit of an easier time with a Socratic seminar and might have encountered them before in the past. I didn't include the standards that I addressed in my Google Slides presentation here because I intended for this to be used for students specifically. So I'll just go through them quickly with you now. The standards that I addressed are reading for literature 1112.1, which is to cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text, including determining where the text leaves matters uncertain. And also speaking and listening 11 to 12.3, which is evaluate a speaker's point of view, reasoning and use of evidence and rhetoric, assessing the stance, premises, links among ideas, word choice, points of emphasis, and tone used. So these are the standards addressed in the Socratic seminar, and we're going to hope that the students are going to cite textual evidence when they make points in the seminar, and also that they're able to, evaluate and respond to each other's statements. So for the anticipatory set, I would take students through a quick review of some of the things that we had already talked about after reading The Great Gatsby. This lesson is kind of assuming that this unit is coming to a close and that we've already discussed some of the major themes, characters, setting, and some of the uses of figurative language in the book. So I would, remind students of some of the things that we had already discussed, and then go ahead and move on to slide 2, where I would quickly review the characters with students. I wouldn't go through and read the entire slide. I would just review some of the major points of the main characters like Nick, Jay, Daisy, and Tom. And just make sure that all the students are on the same page. I'd move on to slide 3 and review the setting, just making sure that they remember where everyone was from, the era that we're in, and things like that. And then slide 4, we would review some of the major plot points. I would ask students to raise their hand and briefly describe scenes that they felt were really important to the overall plot of the story. They should at least bring up the party at the apartment that Tom keeps in New York City and when he broke Myrtle's nose, the reconnection of Daisy and Gatsby at Nick's house, Tom finding out about the affair and confronting Gatsby about it, Nick, Tom, and Jordan finding Myrtle's body, and Gatsby's death at the hands of George before his suicide. So if students miss any of these plot points, I would be sure to mention them and make sure that we're all on the same page. Then we would review the main themes of the novel, just very briefly discussing them. Again, I'm hoping that we've already discussed these at length, so we would just mention them, make sure students remember everything we talked about. And then we would briefly review the major uses of irony and symbolism in the novel, and possibly even refer to anchor charts we might have created earlier in the unit if we need more detail. At that point, we would move into the instruction piece. So I'm hoping that during this lesson, students have already completed at least one Socratic seminar in my class, but assuming that it may have been a little bit of time since then, the instruction piece is going to go through, sort of the rules and regulations of a Socratic seminar in our classroom and what that's going to look like. So today we're going to hold a Socratic seminar to discuss some of these themes, as well as the characters and events in the story. It's been some time since our last Socratic seminar, so we're going to watch a quick video clip about them to refresh your memories. And from there, I would move on to slide 7 and open up the video. And I would allow students to go through and read these slides on the video themselves, and then there are going to be some examples. So we'll watch the first one together.
Raven, do you think that a square is a rectangle? Yes, I do, because I believe a square whole thing. It's not something. But the line's still gonna be there. You're still gonna see the two squares, so it's a rectangle. No. So what you're saying is a star is two triangles. That's what you're saying. No, really, it's like it's five triangles and like a pentagon on the inside of it. If you want to draw it that way. Yeah, okay. I'm so done with this. You don't know your shape. You don't know your geometry.
So at this point, I would pause the video and ask students to talk to me about what was wrong with this example. And I would hope that they would bring up, that there may have been, some disrespect from the second student and things like that. And, going forward, there are 2 more examples from here, each one better than the last. And so I would go through each of these with students pausing at this point and ask them what was wrong or right with that example. So from there, now that we've reminded ourselves of some of the do's and don'ts of Socratic Seminar, I'm going to hand out our protocol sheet and the rubric that you'll be assessed against. Please try your best to begin each of your discussion points with one of these sentence starters as listed in the protocol sheet. Please rearrange your desks into a circle so that everyone can see everybody else. So at this point, I would pause and allow students to make a circle out of their desks or tables. And then I would hand out the protocol sheets and grading rubrics. So here's our protocol sheet that students would get. And it lists some of the ways, it talks about Socratic Seminar a little bit, and then it lists some of the ways that I would prefer students to begin their statements. And I would also hand out our question sheet, which I would prefer to give students ahead of time, maybe the day before, so that they could look through and see questions they might be interested in asking or answering. And then also our grading rubric so that students would know exactly what they were being assessed against. I think it's really important for students to know what's expected of them so that they can get full credit for participation in the seminar. So the teacher, myself, would retain the list of questions as well and start the discussion by asking everyone to go round robin around the table and state something about the book that they found either interesting, surprising, or otherwise relevant to the book and its themes. The goal here isn't to start the seminar just yet, but to get the students thinking about the text, talking aloud, being comfortable with discussion, and inform the teacher which question might be a good one to start the seminar with. So I'm going to start off with a question for you to get the conversation started here. And if the conversation gets off topic, I'll introduce a new one to get the conversation back on track. We may not get through all of the questions designed for this lesson, but that's fine. So, for the rest of the class, one of you will have to take the lead on discussion and pose a question out loud to your fellow students. But to start, I'm going to go ahead and ask one. I'll only step in to remind you if you forget to follow the protocols, or if the conversation gets off topic, I can step in and get it back on track or add in a new question once the conversation's stalled out. So from this point, I would take what the students had talked about in their quick round robin discussion and choose a question that I thought the most students might be interested in discussing. From there, I'm going to let conversation flow naturally. I will step in a couple of times out loud to remind students if they're not following protocol. And then after the first couple of times, if there's 1 or 2 students that are having a difficult time with it, I might just walk around the room and, whisper near their shoulder or tap them quietly, and just point to the sheet just to remind them to try and do that as often as possible. Other than that, I'm just going to kind of step back and let them handle the discussion on their own, and I'll be taking notes on student involvement, listening carefully to the discussion, and marking the student roster to indicate participation points based on the rubric. And as the conversation begins to lull, if no students introduce a new question for too long of a time, I might introduce one myself for students to discuss. I would give them a 2-minute warning when there are 5 minutes left of class. This would allow them to share their final thoughts with each other and kind of wrap up the conversation. And then it would also give the class 2 or 3 minutes at the end for a closing summary and to gather their things before they leave. So in the closure, I would just recap some of the important points that we discussed today. I might offer 2 or 3 that I thought were really important or that sounded very important to students. And then I would let students raise their hands and note and review some of the points that they felt were the most important, things that they heard from other classmates especially, and particularly things that they found really interesting or that taught them something new about the book, maybe something that they hadn't thought of before this seminar. So that's how I would tackle this lesson. I hope that you all enjoy it. I know many of you have been in a Socratic seminar with me before, so that's where I got the idea from. And I really look forward to doing things like this in my future classroom, and I hope that we get to do some of them next year as well together. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great rest of your summer.